The text came in at 6:32 p.m. on March 15, 2024, and for a few seconds I did not touch the phone. I only watched the screen glow in the cup holder of my truck, lighting up the dust on the console, the folded receipt from the flower shop, the old coffee ring I had meant to wipe away that morning, and the calloused side of my right hand resting on the gearshift. Outside the windshield, bastions glowed like a place built for people whose lives were still intact. Warm yellow light spilled from the tall windows onto East Carter Street in Richmond's Shockoe Bottom, catching in the wet brick after an afternoon rain, turning the sidewalk into a dark mirror where couples passed in coats and polished shoes, leaning into each other as if the evening belonged to them. I had been sitting there for 12 minutes, early because I am early to everything, wearing a charcoal suit I had bought 3 days before from a consignment shop on Broad Street, because master electricians do not have Nordstrom money. But a man's 10th wedding anniversary only happens once, and I had wanted to look like I understood the size of the day. The jacket was a little tight across the shoulders, and the trousers had been hemmed for a man half an inch taller than me. But the woman at the shop had said it made me look distinguished, which I knew meant old enough to need kindness and proud enough to pay for it. On the passenger seat, wrapped in white paper with a green ribbon, were stargazer lilies, Paige's favorite, the flowers she had carried on our wedding day at St. Patrick's in Churchill, the flowers I had sent to her office every March 15 for 10 years. Except this year I had gone to pick them up myself because I wanted to hand them to her across a candle-lit table and see what happened to her face. I wanted to see if the woman I married was still there beneath the late nights and the careful distance, and the phone that always seemed to turn downward when I entered a room. The phone buzzed again, a small impatient vibration against the plastic. I picked it up and read the message. "I'm stuck at work. Big deadline. I'm so sorry, babe. Happy 10th anniversary. I'll make it up to you this weekend. Love you." Then 3 heart emojis. Then a kiss face, the digital shorthand of a woman who had been lying to me for 14 months and had become so comfortable with it that she could decorate the lie with little cartoon hearts. I read it once without breathing. Then I read it again, slower, as if a slower reading might reveal some hidden sincerity between the words. Stuck at work, big deadline. I could see her typing it, probably with one thumb, maybe while laughing at something else, maybe while standing in an elevator, maybe while another man waited for her. I did not know that yet, not in the clean, factual way I would know it an hour later. But some part of the body learns truth before the mind gives it permission. My throat tightened. My thumb hovered over the reply field. I typed "it's okay." Then I deleted it. I typed "I love you too." Deleted that too. I typed nothing. For the last year, I had trained myself to accept small absences as normal. Paige was tired. Paige was under pressure. Paige had taken on more responsibilities at Mercer Gaines Capital. Paige's boss was demanding. Paige's job required late calls and weekend emergencies and conferences where spouses were not invited, because the events were really just internal strategy sessions. I had believed each explanation, because believing them allowed the house on Montrose Avenue to keep standing in my head. A marriage is like old wiring in a wall. Most of the time, you do not see the damage. You see lights turning on and convince yourself the system is fine. You ignore the faint burning smell because tearing open the wall is messy and expensive and frightening. I had ignored a lot. I ignored the new clothes that appeared in her closet, clothes she claimed were on sale but still looked too expensive for our life. I ignored the way she stopped asking about my jobs unless the answer involved money. I ignored how she flinched when I touched her back in the kitchen. Not violently, not obviously, just enough for a husband to feel it and spend the next 10 minutes pretending he had not. I ignored the way she laughed at her phone in bed and then locked the screen when I shifted beside her. I ignored the absence of her perfume on nights when she came home from work, but the faint presence of another world clinging to her hair, restaurant smoke, hotel soap, champagne. Things I could not name then because I was still trying to be a decent husband instead of a suspicious one. I almost drove home. That is the part I think about most. I almost turned the key, put the truck in reverse, let the lilies slide against the seat, and went back to a house where my children were asleep under the supervision of a babysitter. And my wife was, according to her phone, buried beneath a deadline. I almost swallowed it because swallowing had become a habit. I almost called Knox, my oldest friend, and asked if he wanted to grab a beer, But even that felt like confessing something before I understood what I was confessing. Then I remembered the reservation deposit. $80 non-refundable. $80 mattered when you owned a small electrical contracting company, and every invoice had to clear before every paycheck went out. It was absurd, maybe, that $80 pushed me through the door that changed my life. But people who have never had to count money do not understand how often money becomes the hand on your back, moving you toward destiny. I picked up the lilies, stepped out into the damp March evening, and walked into Bastion's. The hostess smiled the polished smile of someone trained not to react when a reservation for two becomes a table for one. She led me through the dining room past men in dark jackets and women with quiet jewelry, past tables where candles trembled inside glass holders, past a bar where bottles glowed amber and green beneath brass lights. The restaurant smelled of butter, wine, roasted meat, and money. I had worked in buildings like this, not as a guest but as a man with a tool belt, crawling through back rooms, replacing panels, bringing power to rooms where people later sat and pretended they had made the light themselves. The hostess seated me near the back, by a window overlooking an alley. It was not romantic, but I did not need romantic anymore. I set the lilies on the empty chair across from me, because putting them on the table made the loneliness too visible. The waiter brought water and asked if I wanted to wait. I said no, then yes. Then I said I would start with a glass of Barolo because I had seen the word on the wine list and remembered Paige once saying Barolo sounded elegant. I opened the menu without reading. I listened to the room, the clinking glasses, the murmured conversations, the faint jazz from hidden speakers, a woman behind me laughing too loudly, a fork dropped somewhere near the bar, ordinary sounds, civilized sounds, kind of sounds people make around ruin, when ruin has not yet announced itself. Then I looked up, across the restaurant, behind a decorative wooden screen separating the main dining room from a more intimate corner section. I saw a black dress. Not any black dress. The black dress, the one I had bought Paige for Christmas 3 months earlier from a boutique in Carytown, after she stopped outside the window and said, almost carelessly, that she had never owned anything that looked so effortlessly beautiful. I had gone back the next day and bought it. The clerk had looked at my work boots, then at the dress, then at me, but she wrapped it anyway. Paige tried it on in our bedroom and twirled once in front of the mirror, laughing when I told her she looked like trouble. I remember standing behind her, my hands on her waist, watching her watch herself, thinking that desire changes after years of marriage but does not disappear, not if you are careful with it, not if you remember to see the person in front of you. She had said, I'm saving this for something special. She was wearing it at Bastion's on our anniversary. The anniversary she was too busy to celebrate with me. The man across from her was silver-haired, tanned, and tailored in a way that looked less like clothing and more like a legal argument for superiority. His suit sat perfectly on him. His watch caught the candlelight when he reached for his champagne glass. He leaned toward Paige with his hand resting over hers on the white tablecloth, not testing, not asking, already certain of the territory. There was champagne in a silver bucket, 2 glasses, the thin-stemmed kind that make people feel elegant even when they are doing ugly things. He said something. Paige laughed. That laugh, not the polite one, not the office one, not the tired little exhale she gave me when I tried to make a joke while loading the dishwasher. The real laugh, the laugh I remembered from early mornings before children, from road trips, from the kitchen floor of our first apartment when a cabinet door fell off in my hand, and I bowed like a magician. I had thought life had taken that laugh from her. It had not. She had given it to someone else. Then she leaned across the table and kissed him. Not a peck, not a mistake, not a brief brush that could be explained by foreign custom or too much champagne. It was a kiss with history behind it and expectation ahead of it. It was a kiss that knew where it would sleep later. The restaurant sounds collapsed into a single high metallic tone, like a live wire screaming inside a wall. My hands gripped the table so hard the linen shifted. For one terrible second, I was no longer a husband, father, business owner, or grown man. I was an exposed nerve. I saw the champagne, the black dress, the man's hand, Paige's mouth, the lilies on the chair beside me, and something old and primitive in me rose up with such force that I stood before I decided to stand. I was going to cross the room. I was going to grab the table and flip it. I was going to ask my wife how the deadline was going in a voice every person in that restaurant would remember. I was going to make the room as ugly as what she had done. I made it 2 steps before a hand closed around my forearm. Sit down, a woman said, Her voice was low and calm, but not soft. There are people who are calm because they are peaceful, and people who are calm because they have trained themselves to remain functional while everyone else loses control. This was the second kind. I turned and saw a woman I had never met standing beside my table. Late 40s, maybe. Dark hair pulled back tight. Navy blazer. White blouse. No jewelry except a plain watch. Her face was not unkind, but it was closed in the way courthouse doors are closed after hours. She had the posture of someone who understood rooms as tactical spaces. Law enforcement. Military intelligence. Something disciplined and dangerous in a practical way. Let go of my arm, I said. Sit down first. Lady, I do not know who you are, but my wife is over there kissing another man, and I am stopping you from making the biggest mistake of your life. She did not tighten her grip. She did not raise her voice. She simply looked at me with gray eyes so still they seemed almost inhuman. I know who that man is. I know who your wife is. I know what is happening at that table, and I need you to sit down, because the real show is about to start. The words were theatrical. Her certainty was not. I have spent too many years inside unfinished buildings not to recognize when something is load-bearing. Her voice was load-bearing. My body still wanted violence, but another part of me, the part that checks a breaker twice before touching wire, recognized danger in my own momentum. I sat. The woman sat across from me in Paige's chair, beside Paige's lilies, as if my anniversary dinner had always been waiting for her instead. My name is Vivian Hale, she said. I am a private investigator. She reached into her blazer and slid a business card across the table with 2 fingers. I was hired 3 months ago by a woman named Marguerite Ryland. Does that name mean anything to you? No, it will. Marguerite Ryland is the second ex-wife of the man your wife is currently kissing. His name is Sterling Mercer. He is the CEO of Mercer Gaines Capital, where your wife works, and their affair is about to cost him $5 million. I stared at her. Across the room, the waiter approached Paige and Sterling with another bottle of champagne. My wife smiled up at him like she belonged to that world, like she had never stood barefoot in our kitchen at midnight eating cereal from the box, while our first baby refused to sleep. My anniversary flowers were beginning to bend in the empty chair. A stranger was telling me that the destruction of my marriage was a supporting detail in another woman's revenge. Explain, I said. Vivian looked toward the bar. Order another glass of wine. Breathe. Do not look at them for more than 3 seconds at a time. Do not let your face do anything useful to them. I will explain, but first you need to promise me 30 minutes. No confrontation, no scene. I have a colleague outside with a camera and another at the Jefferson Hotel, where Mr. Mercer has a standing reservation in room 412. If you blow this up now, you get noise and regret. If you wait, you get evidence, leverage, and a future where you are not the unstable husband in someone else's story. I ordered the wine because she told me to, and because obedience to a calm instruction felt like the only thing keeping my body from betraying me. Vivian began. Sterling Mercer was 52, founder of Mercer Gaines Capital, old Virginia money dressed in modern finance, worth roughly $40 million, divorced twice. First marriage ended cleanly. Second marriage, to Marguerite Ryland, ended in 2021 after Marguerite discovered his affair with his executive assistant, Elise Corwin. Elise had worked for Sterling for 4 years. The affair lasted 2. Marguerite's attorney had been very good, Vivian said, and very patient. The settlement was $8 million and included a morality clause, specific enough to matter, enforceable under Virginia law, stating that if Sterling engaged in another workplace affair within 5 years of the divorce, he owed Marguerite an additional $5 million. His attorney told him not to sign. Sterling signed anyway because men like Sterling believe consequences are for the less coordinated. Vivian paused and looked past me toward the corner. Paige Sable became his executive assistant in 2018. Based on surveillance, their affair began in January 2023. 14 months ago, 14 months entered the room and sat between us. I thought of 14 months of me trying to be understanding. 14 months of reheated dinners. 14 months of Paige saying not tonight. 14 months of the children asking why mom missed bedtime. 14 months of me defending her, even to myself. I was good at defending her. Too good. A man can build a cage out of explanations and call it loyalty. Vivian slid a folded bank statement toward me. During my investigation of Sterling, my forensic team identified payments to your wife beyond her salary. $15,000 per month, deposited into an individual account at Virginia National Bank in Paige Sable's name only. The source is Mercer Advisory LLC, a shell company registered to Sterling Mercer. No employees, no legitimate clients, no operations. Its only visible function is to move money from Sterling to Paige. I looked at the balance, $211,847.33. My eyes kept returning to the cents. 33 cents. The precise insult of it. My wife had hidden more than $200,000 while I waited 3 months to replace the water heater because business had been slow in November. She had watched me come home exhausted, hands split from work, shoulders aching, and she had let me believe we were just getting by. I picked up my wine, then set it down untouched. She has been hiding this from me. Yes, while we are married. Yes, in Virginia, that matters. Vivian spoke with the clean brutality of someone who had learned that cushioning facts only prolongs the fall. The money is marital property. The concealment will damage her credibility in equitable distribution. The employer connection makes it uglier. The affair timeline matters. The hotel records matter. And if you have children, this pattern of deception may matter in custody. I said their names quietly, Ryland and Odette. Vivian's face shifted for the first time, not into sympathy exactly, but into focus. Then listen to me as a father, not as a betrayed husband. Pride wants you to cross that room. Fatherhood needs you to sit still. Your children need you to be the calmest man in this restaurant. I looked at Paige. Sterling was refilling her glass. She tilted her head toward him in that old, familiar way, inviting more, asking without asking. They looked like people who had considered the angles and concluded they were safe. They had accounted for staff discretion, separate accounts, hotel routines, work excuses, and my habit of trust. They had not accounted for Marguerite Ryland. They had not accounted for Vivian Hale. And they had not accounted for the possibility that a man they believed predictable could sit through his own humiliation and learn from it. Why are you helping me? I asked. Your client is the ex-wife. Vivian did not look away. My client wants proof Sterling violated the clause. Your wife is the proof. Everything I gathered about her involvement is part of that case. The evidence does not become less true, because it may help you too. I am not your investigator, but I can deliver my file to your attorney. Legally, cleanly, admissibly, she paused. I was a detective for 14 years. I have seen endings, loud endings, men screaming in restaurants, women throwing glasses, spouses making scenes that feel righteous for 10 minutes and useful to opposing counsel for years. I am offering you the other kind. Quiet, calculated, devastating, the kind where 6 months from now Paige Sable sits in a courtroom and realizes everything she built in the dark has been wired directly to the lights. Tell me what to do, I said. Go home, pay the babysitter, kiss your kids goodnight, act normal. Tomorrow call a divorce attorney. I will send the file. Tonight they will leave this restaurant and go to the Jefferson. My colleague will photograph them entering and exiting. We will have hotel documentation, timestamps, and receipts. Let the evidence finish ripening. Do not pick it early because your hands are shaking. I stood. I left cash on the table. I picked up the lilies, though I did not know why. Vivian said, Mr. Sable. I turned. Happy anniversary. It was not mockery. It was the saddest mercy she had available. I walked out at 7 p.m. without looking at the corner table, without looking at the black dress I had bought or the champagne I had not paid for, or the man touching my wife's hand. Outside, March air hit my face cold enough to make my eyes water, but I still did not cry. I drove home with the lilies on the passenger seat, their scent too sweet in the cab, like rot disguised as beauty. At home, the babysitter was on the couch, watching something on her phone. She looked surprised to see me early. I paid her, thanked her, locked the door behind her, and stood in the living room where everything looked suddenly staged. The wedding photo on the mantel, Paige's throw blanket, the little basket where Odette's hair ties collected like bright plastic insects, Ryland's shoes by the stairs, one upright and one on its side. A home is not destroyed all at once. It is hollowed out while you are still living in it, until one night you step inside and hear the echo. I went upstairs. Ryland was asleep sideways, 7 years old and loose-limbed, his baseball glove on the nightstand because he believed it helped him dream better. Odette was curled around her stuffed rabbit, 4 years old, thumb hovering near her mouth, hair tangled into a dark nest I would have to negotiate with in the morning. I stood there watching them breathe. I thought about walking across a restaurant. I thought about the custody hearing that might exist someday because I had not. I thought about how a father's rage, if indulged, can become evidence against his own children's stability. The tears would not come. Something harder took their place. Resolution, cold, structural, a breaker shut inside me. And with it came the knowledge that the lights were about to go out in Paige's life. But mine had to stay on for the children. The next morning, I called Boone Taggart, a divorce attorney Knox once described as a man who could turn a handshake into discovery. Boone was 53, former military JAG, with an office on Main Street in an old bank building where the vault still sat behind the conference room like a relic of other people's secrets. He poured coffee from a pot that looked old enough to testify. "Walk me through it," he said. So I did: the text, the restaurant, Vivian, Sterling, Marguerite, the morality clause, the hidden account, the children sleeping upstairs, while their mother's other life kept records of itself across the city. Boone listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked, "How do you feel?" Like I have been wiring a house for 10 years, and someone just told me the whole thing was on the wrong circuit. Boone nodded. "That is about right." Then he opened a legal pad. Virginia allows fault-based divorce. Adultery is grounds. Concealment of marital assets is significant. Payments from the affair partner through a shell company will poison her credibility. Custody will be contested. But a parent who maintained a 14-month deception, hid $210,000, and used work obligations as cover for hotel visits is going to have problems presenting herself as the stable party. You did the right thing last night. Most men would have made themselves feel better and their case worse. I did not feel noble. I felt contaminated. For the next week, I lived 2 lives. In one, I woke the children, made breakfast, packed lunches, answered work calls, inspected panels, corrected apprentices, paid invoices, and kissed Paige on the cheek when she came home because Boone told me not to change patterns too dramatically before service. In the other life, I watched my wife move through our house like a stranger wearing my memory. She asked whether I had taken the trash out. She complained about a client. She kissed Odette's forehead. She stood at the sink drinking water in the black sweatpants she had owned since before Ryland was born. Every ordinary gesture became unbearable because ordinary gestures are how liars survive. They make coffee, they fold towels, they remind you about permission slips, they ask whether you need anything from the store. They make betrayal look domestic. Vivian's file arrived at Boone's office 6 days later. It was airtight, 47 photographs over 3 months, 11 entries and exits from the Jefferson Hotel, Room 412, credit card receipts, vehicle timestamps, photographs of Sterling's hand at Paige's lower back as they entered, photographs of Paige leaving with her hair different than when she arrived, bank statements, Mercer Advisory LLC filing, documentation of Elise Corwin, the previous executive assistant, establishing Sterling's pattern. The file did not rage. It did not accuse. It simply existed. And its calm made it more brutal than any outburst could have been. Boone filed for divorce on April 3, 2024. Paige was served at Mercer Gaines Capital outside Sterling's office, where the James River was visible through glass and money. That evening, she came home in tears, holding the papers like they had burned her hands. "Aldrich, what is this? Why are you doing this?" I was at the kitchen table with a glass of water. No documents, no props, just the table where our children did homework and spilled cereal and made birthday cards. I said, "I was at Bastion's on our anniversary. I saw you." The color left her face so fast it looked mechanical, like power cut to a room. "You were there. I made a reservation for us. I sat 2 tables away, while the text you sent about being stuck at work was still on my phone." She lowered herself onto the floor because the chair was too far away, or because her legs stopped trusting her. "It is not what you think. It is exactly what I think. 14 months, room 412, Mercer Advisory LLC, $211,847.33. 47 photographs, 11 hotel visits, text messages, receipts. I know everything, Paige. Not because I spied on you, because someone was already watching Sterling, and you walked into the frame." She cried then, not the kind of crying people do to persuade, not yet. The first wave was real, an animal sound from someone whose hidden structure had collapsed while she was still inside. Then came the bargaining. "I will end it tonight, I swear. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. Think about the kids. Please do not take my kids." "I did think about the kids," I said. "That is why I did not cross the restaurant. That is why we are having this conversation in a kitchen. instead of with police pulling me off Sterling Mercer in a dining room full of cameras. She flinched at his name. I told her the black dress mattered, the emojis mattered, the flowers mattered, the account mattered, the hotel mattered, but more than all of it, the ease mattered. You lied easily, Paige. That is the part I cannot survive. Counseling can help people who are lost. It cannot resurrect a person who chose another life and kept coming home to mine for convenience. She stayed on the floor a long time. I went upstairs and closed the children's door so they would not hear their mother crying. That was the last real conversation of our marriage. The divorce took 5 months, an excavated ugliness I wish I had never seen, but needed to know. Paige became many women, depending on the room. With the children, wounded and soft. With her attorney, indignant. In emails, practical. In court filings, minimized. She admitted mistakes, but resisted patterns. Boone kept returning to patterns. The hidden account was frozen. Paige's attorney called the money personal compensation. Boone showed the shell company. Paige's attorney said the hotel visits were private mistakes. Boone showed repeated use of work emergencies as cover while I handled childcare. Paige said she never intended to harm the children. Boone did not argue intention. He argued effect. Ryland had started asking why Mom missed his game. Odette had begun waking at night and calling for whichever parent was not there, as if absence had become a person in the house. The children did not know the details, but children live inside whether adults think they are hiding. In August, the court awarded me primary physical custody during the school week. Paige received alternating weekends and 1 weeknight dinner. The house on Montrose Avenue remained the children's primary residence, which meant it stayed with me. The hidden account was frozen and divided. Sterling's reckoning happened in a separate courtroom, but cast the same shadow. Marguerite Ryland enforced the morality clause. Sterling fought, lost, and owed $5 million. 3 major clients withdrew funds from Mercer Gaines Capital after the pattern became known in Richmond's business circle. Sterling did not become poor. Men like him rarely do. He became diminished, which for a man built entirely out of status may be worse. Paige was terminated in a restructuring so bloodless it probably came with catered coffee. No severance, no reference. An NDA tight enough to silence whatever version of victimhood she had planned. A year passed. March 15 came again. I did not go to Bastion's. I did not buy lilies. I took Ryland and Odette to a pizza place on Broad Street, where the cheese burned the roof of my mouth, and Odette won a stuffed penguin from the claw machine after 11 tries. She named it Electric because she said it looked surprised. And apparently surprise is what electricity looks like to a 5-year-old. Ryland laughed so hard soda came out of his nose. I laughed too. It felt rusty, not healed. There is a difference. I still run Sable Electric. Business is steady. We picked up 2 new contracts. I hired a 9th employee, Darius from Churchill, 22, all ambition and no polish. Showing up early with organized tools and questions he is not embarrassed to ask. My mother Della retired from the post office and comes over twice a week, which means she takes over my kitchen while I stand there like an invited guest. She braids Odette's hair, critiques Ryland's batting stance, and reminds me that the United States Postal Service taught her everything she knows about surviving storm. Rain, snow, sleet, hail, cheating spouses. She said once, sipping tea on my porch while the children slept. You keep delivering. I am not healed. I do not say that for pity. Healing is not always the right word. Some things do not heal. They scar into instruction. I no longer trust laughter the way I once did. I notice phones turned downward. I notice when explanations arrive too smoothly. I notice when expensive things appear without a story that fits. I am not proud of that, but I am not ashamed either. Betrayal rewires a person. The goal is not to become who you were before. That person was easier to fool. The goal is to keep the lights on without pretending the fire never happened. Last week, Ryland rode with me to a job site in Henrico because it was a teacher work day. He sat in the passenger seat with his glove in his lap and asked how I know which wire goes where. You read the blueprints, I said. You follow the code. And when the blueprints do not match reality, which happens more than people think, you use judgment and experience. What if you get it wrong? Then the lights do not come on, or worse, something shorts out. So you trace the circuit, find the mistake, fix it, and make sure it does not happen again. He thought about that, turning the glove over in his hands. Is that what happened with you and Mom? I looked at him, 8 years old, too young for the truth, too smart for a lie. Something like that, buddy. The house had a wrong circuit. We fixed it. He nodded, satisfied enough for now, and looked out the window. The morning sun came through the windshield warm and gold, making Richmond look innocent in the way cities sometimes do when they have not yet shown you what they are capable of holding. My truck smelled like coffee, electrical tape, and work. A year before, I had sat 2 tables away from my wife while she kissed another man on our anniversary, and I had been 1 step from destroying myself in public. A stranger grabbed my arm and said the real show was about to start. I stayed seated. I listened. I waited. When the show ended, the lights went out for everyone who had been operating in the dark. Mine stayed on, not because I was untouched, not because justice healed anything, because I remembered, just in time, that power is only useful when it is controlled.